Today we're going to be talking about the volume of prisms. We've already talked about surface area, meaning that if we had lots and lots of little squares, let's say that in this case we're using centimeters. So if I had a lot of little squares that were 1 centimeter tall and 1 centimeter wide, and I covered that entire prism shape in those squares, it would take a certain number of them to make the surface area. When we talk about volume, what we're now talking about is if our prism were hollow and we were to fill it up with a lot of little cubes. We would be talking about a little cube that was 1 centimeter tall, 1 centimeter deep, and 1 centimeter wide. We would then try to figure out how many of those little cubes would fit inside of our prism. So that's what we mean when we're talking about volume. Let's look at our prism here. It's 10 centimeters tall, 8 centimeters deep, and 7 centimeters wide. We have a formula that's a lot simpler than the surface area, actually. I'm going to write it here, and I'd like you to copy it down. We have volume of any given prism equals the area of the base times the height. When I'm talking about height with a big H, remember that I'm talking about the distance between the sandwich faces of the prism. If I make this and this my base, and remember with this type of prism I can choose that, I will say that the height is the distance between those bases, so the height is 10 centimeters. Let's go ahead and label that so I don't forget. Finding the area of the base. When I'm doing that, I've chosen that this is my base here. This particular prism has a rectangular base. The area of a rectangle has the formula of base times height, little h, meaning if we were to slice this base, we would actually have it look like this. The area of this rectangle is this base times this little h. Okay, so I get 56. So over here we're going to start filling this in. The volume is little base times little height times the big height. Remember that I always write my formula first and then I just fill in all the things that I know. The little base here is 7. The little height of the base, so the height of the base here is 8. And the big H, the distance between the sandwich faces of the prism, is 10. So 7 times 8 is 56, times 10 is 560. The units for volume are always cubed, so anytime you're giving a volume, you put the little 3 after the units. You do not put the 3 after this number here. It always attaches right to the units to tell you that you're finding a volume. You're finding how many of those little cubes you could stick inside that shape. So this shape here, you could fit exactly 560 of those little centimeter cubes inside this prism. Here's another example. This time the prism is a triangular prism, which means that even though we still use the formula volume equals the area of the base times the height, this time the formula for the area of the base is going to be different because the base is a triangle. So let's just look at the base. This time we only have one choice for what the base is. It's this here. It's a triangle with a height of 5 and a base of 8. We also have to remember that even if we were given numbers on the sides like this, they would not be important because the height is the distance that's perpendicular from the point of the triangle straight to the other end. So you see the little h here, that's what tells you what the height is. The area of a triangle is the base, so 8, times the little h, meaning the height of the base, so 5, divided by 2. So when we start filling in our volume formula, we have to remember to plug that in. So the volume is the base times the height of the base, so little h, divided by 2, all times big H, so the distance between the sandwich faces again, from here down to here, which we know is 12. So when we fill that in, we can start simplifying. I know that my volume is given as volume is equal to little base 8 times height of the base, so little h, times 5, all divided by 2, times 12. And here's where I can start simplifying. Everything here is being multiplied or divided, meaning that we can simplify using common factors. So we can pick 2 has common factors with 8 and 2 has common factors with 12. In this case, I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to use 2 and 12. If we put 12 over 1, 12 and 2 both have a common factor of 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 12 divided by 2 is 6. Let's just rewrite that. We know that the volume is now 8 times 5 times 6. The problem doesn't give you any units, so you're just going to write units cubed. So the answer you'll get is 240 units cubed, with this little 3 attached to the units, not to the number here. Let's recap. Our formula for all volumes of all prisms is always going to be volume equals the area of the base times the height. But every prism may have a different shape of base, meaning you're going to have to decide what formula to use for the area of the base. In the first example, the base was a rectangle. In this case, the base was a triangle, so we used a different formula to find the area of the base before we multiplied it by big H. Alright, here's our last example. A prism has a base shown to the left. The height of the prism is 12 yards. What is the volume? Looking at this problem, they don't actually give you a picture of what the prism looks like. Instead, this here is a picture of what the base looks like. So you don't actually have a 3D image, you're just looking from the top down at this prism. So you imagine it goes on 3D below. We already know that the height of the prism is 12 yards though, so this is our big H. We want to save that number for later. Okay, so I'm going to write it up here. Moving forward from here, we need to write our formula. Volume equals the area of the base times big H times the height. Because we have such a weird base, we need to figure that out separately. Looking at this, we have two parts. We have a triangle part, and we have a square part. Okay, we're going to start off by just tackling the area of the base, and we're going to worry about big H later, so I'm just going to write it over here. This part here, the area of a rectangle, base times little height, 6 times 6, plus this here. If we look here, because it's a rectangle shape, we know that this line here, the base of the triangle, is also 6 yards. The height of the triangle is 4 yards. The area of a triangle is little base times little height divided by 2. We're going to fill that in with 6 times 4, all divided by 2. And then the entire thing will be multiplied by big H later. Let's continue simplifying. 6 times 6 is 36. Plus 6 times 4 divided by 2 is 12, all times big H. So if we continue simplifying, 36 plus 12 is 48. Finally, we get volume equals 48 times the big H, which we finally fill in with 12, which we saved from earlier, and we end up getting 576 yards cubed is our volume. Again, what that means is if I took a cube that was 1 yard tall, 1 yard deep, and 1 yard wide, I could fit 576 of them inside this prism, which you don't see 3D, this is just a picture of the base.